From kids who broke down in front of judges to teenagers who walked into courtrooms with no expression at all, these are children who did things most adults would not even imagine. Some came from loving homes, others came from nothing, and a few were barely old enough to ride a bike. Yet they ended up facing decades behind bars. Today, we are looking at the kids whose crimes stunned entire countries, and how they reacted when the gavel finally came down and life in a cell became their new reality. Leith Smith.
From Elmore County now, the sentence has been reduced for a man convicted of a 2018 murder, armed robbery, and theft.
Leith Smith was sentenced to die in prison, and it came down to a societal issue that we see when it comes to race.
Leith Smith was 15 years old in February of 2015 when he and 4 friends decided to break into homes in Millbrook, Alabama. They were after gaming systems and electronics, the kind of haul a group of teenagers thinks they can flip for quick cash. A neighbor noticed a car parked outside a house she knew was empty, and she called the police. When officers arrived, things went sideways fast because one of the teens, 16-year-old Adonte Washington, ran from the back of the property with a gun in his hand, and an officer fatally shot him. So here is where the story takes a turn most people find hard to swallow. Leith had been inside the house and never fired a single shot. But under Alabama's felony murder rule, anyone taking part in a felony that results in a death can be charged with that death, even when the police are the ones who pulled the trigger. The other 3 teens took plea deals, but Leith turned down a 25-year offer and chose to go to trial. A jury convicted him of felony murder along with burglary and theft, and the judge handed down a 65-year sentence. The courtroom erupted in shouts when the number was read out loud. An appeals court later trimmed the total to 55 by allowing the theft sentences to run at the same time. Then, in 2023, after his attorneys argued he had received ineffective counsel at the original hearing, a judge resentenced him to 30 years. The family of the boy who actually died spoke on Leith's behalf at that hearing, saying they did not hold him responsible. Mary Bell. In May of 1968, the city of Newcastle in northeast England was rocked by something so dark that most adults could barely speak about it. A 4-year-old boy named Martin Brown was found dead in an abandoned house in the Scotswood district. There were no obvious signs of violence on his body, and at first investigators thought he might have swallowed pills from an empty aspirin bottle nearby. Then strange notes started turning up at a local nursery, scrawled on the blackboard, claiming responsibility for killing Martin. The handwriting belonged to 10-year-old Mary Bell, a girl who lived just streets away. 2 months later, 3-year-old Brian Howe was found strangled in a patch of waste ground with small cuts on his body and the letter M scratched into his stomach. Mary, by then 11, had used a pair of broken scissors. Police began to piece things together because Mary had been visiting the families of the victims, asking odd questions and showing absolutely no fear. In December of 1968, Mary stood trial at Newcastle Assizes alongside a 13-year-old neighbor named Norma Bell, no relation, and Norma was acquitted. Mary was found guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility after psychiatrists testified she displayed classic signs of psychopathy. She was sentenced to detention for life and served 12 years before her release in 1980 at the age of 23. She was granted a new identity, and in 2003, the High Court extended that anonymity to her daughter and granddaughter for life. John Venables and Robert Thompson.
Now, what's your full name?
Robert Thompson.
What do they call you, Robert or Bobby?
Robert.
I think Bobby's a more friendly name, do you agree?
Yeah.
On the afternoon of the 12th of February 1993, 2-year-old James Bulger was holding his mother's hand inside the New Strand shopping centre in Bootle, just outside Liverpool, England. She let go for a moment to pay at the butcher's counter, and that was all it took. 2 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables, led him out of the building by the hand. CCTV footage caught the entire abduction, and the country still finds those grainy images difficult to look at. Over the next few hours, the 2 boys walked James more than 2 miles across the city, pausing to drop him on his head, kick him, and laugh at strangers who asked if everything was all right. At a railway line in Walton, the violence became something nearly impossible to describe. They beat him with bricks, an iron bar known as a fish plate, and threw paint into his eyes before leaving his body on the tracks, hoping a train would make the death look like an accident. His body was discovered 2 days later after a train did pass through. Police identified the two boys from the shopping center footage, and they were arrested within a week. The trial took place at Preston Crown Court in November, and the jury returned guilty verdicts on both abduction and murder. The judge described the killing as one of unparalleled evil and barbarity. Thompson and Venables became the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. They served 8 years inside secure youth facilities before being released on lifelong license in 2001, with new identities and worldwide reporting restrictions still in place to this day. Graham Young. Graham Young was 14 when he first walked into a chemist's shop in North London and convinced the man behind the counter that he was 17 and studying chemistry. He left with antimony, digitalis, arsenic, and a heavy metal called thallium that is unusually hard to detect in the human body. He started experimenting at home, slipping small doses into the tea his stepmother Molly was drinking. She built a tolerance, so on Easter Saturday of 1962, he switched to thallium, and she was dead within days. Her cremation destroyed any evidence of what had really happened. His father, sister, and a school friend also fell ill, but the family was slow to suspect a child. A science teacher eventually found bottles of poison inside Graham's school desk, and an aunt who knew about his fascination contacted the police. In August of 1962, he was sent to Broadmoor Hospital at the age of 14, the youngest patient admitted there since 1885. He spent 9 years inside and convinced doctors he was rehabilitated, so in February of 1971, he walked out a free man. Within months, he was working as a storeman at John Hadland Laboratories in Hertfordshire, brewing tea for his co-workers and quietly dosing them with thallium. 2 of them died, and around 70 others fell seriously ill before anyone connected the outbreak to him. He had been keeping a detailed diary the whole time, recording doses and symptoms like a scientist running an experiment, and that diary became the evidence that put him away for good. In 1972, he was sentenced to life in prison, and he died at HMP Parkhurst in 1990 at the age of 42.
नाम अमरजीत सदा उर्फ मेघुलवा, पता बेगूसराय बिहार, काम 8 साल में बना serial killer.
Amarjit Sada. In the rural Indian village of Musahari in Bihar, an 8-year-old boy named Amarjit Sada was already 3 murders deep before anyone outside his own family realized. His first victim was a 6-month-old cousin, killed at home while Amarjit was supposed to be watching her. He led his mother to the spot in the yard where he had buried her after smashing her head with a stone. His parents, terrified of shame and what the village might do, chose to bury the matter quietly along with the child. Months later, he strangled his own 8-month-old sister while the family slept, and the parents covered that one up too. In 2007, he turned his attention outside the family when a neighbor named Chun Chun Devi left her 6-month-old daughter Khushbu asleep in a local school building while she ran errands. Amarjit picked the baby up, carried her a short distance away, struck her with a brick, and buried her in a shallow grave. When the mother raised the alarm, the village turned out to search, and a few hours later, Amarjit calmly admitted what he had done and led searchers straight to the spot. Police took him into custody, and during questioning he asked for biscuits before answering anything else. He described the killings in clinical detail and showed no fear of consequences. A psychologist who assessed him concluded he derived pleasure from inflicting pain. Indian law at the time prevented the prosecution of a child his age, so he was sent to a juvenile remand home for a maximum of 3 years and was released in 2010.
The now 16-year-old girl is currently in closed custody at the Alberta Hospital in Edmonton. In order to begin her reintegration, her treatment team and her lawyers say she needs more exposure to the outside world.
Jasmine Richardson. 12-year-old Jasmine Richardson lived in Medicine Hat, Alberta, with her parents Mark and Deborah and her 8-year-old brother Jacob. Her life looked ordinary from the outside, but she had started seeing a 23-year-old man named Jeremy Steinke, whom she met at a punk show in early 2006. Her parents found out about the relationship and forbade her from seeing him, and Jasmine took that very personally. On the 23rd of April 2006, Steinke broke into the family's home through the basement wearing a neoprene mask and carrying a knife. He stabbed Deborah Richardson 12 times in the basement, and when Mark came running with a screwdriver to defend his wife, Steinke stabbed him 24 times. Upstairs, 8-year-old Jacob was attacked in his bedroom. Steinke later testified that Jasmine cut her little brother's throat herself, but she told a different story at trial, claiming he ordered her to do it. The couple fled in Steinke's truck and were arrested less than a day later after digital evidence on her computer made the plan obvious. In 2007, Jasmine was found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder, becoming the youngest person in Canadian history convicted of multiple first-degree counts. Because Canadian law caps the maximum sentence for someone her age, she received 10 years, 4 of which were served in a psychiatric facility. Steinke received 3 concurrent life sentences with no chance of parole for 25 years. Jasmine completed her sentence in May of 2016 and now lives in Canada under a new identity. Jordan Brown.
New at noon, a boy charged with killing his father's pregnant fiancée when he was just 11 years old is getting a hearing to determine if he deserves a new juvenile court trial.
Now to a big story that we will be following all day long.
Absolutely. Jordan Brown, the boy that a court said shot and killed his father's pregnant fiancée.
Jordan Brown was 11 years old when his life changed on the morning of the 20th of February, 2009, in Wampum, Pennsylvania. He lived on a rural property with his father's pregnant fiancée, Kenzie Hook, and her 2 young daughters from a previous relationship. Kenzie was 26 and just weeks away from delivering a baby boy when she was found in her bed with a shotgun wound to the back of her head. Her unborn son died from oxygen deprivation a short time later. Police quickly focused on Jordan because he owned a 20-gauge youth model shotgun, and prosecutors argued he used it to kill Kenzie before catching the school bus with her 7-year-old daughter. Investigators suggested Jordan was jealous of the new baby. Pennsylvania law required initial homicide charges to be filed in adult court, and he faced the possibility of becoming the youngest American sentenced to life without parole. After legal back and forth, the case was moved to juvenile court, and in April of 2012, a judge found him delinquent, the juvenile equivalent of a guilty verdict, on first-degree murder charges. He was sent to a residential treatment facility with custody ending at age 21. But in 2018, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court unanimously overturned the conviction, ruling there had not been enough evidence to prove the shotgun was actually the murder weapon. By that point, Jordan had spent more than 7 years in detention. He was exonerated and walked out a free man, later filing a civil lawsuit against state troopers that was unsuccessful in 2024. He has always maintained that he did not kill Kenzie Hoke. Joshua Phillips.
Good morning, Your Honor. Sheila Loises on behalf of the state. We are ready to call the case of Joshua Phillips. He is 60 on the court's calendar. He is here for a sentence review. All right, thank you.
Through the entire time, I was putting myself in a fantasy world that nothing had happened, and that was my defense for everything when I was a kid. Was if something went wrong, ignore it. It'll go away.
Young killer hears his fate.
I'm certain that on Judgment Day, you, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, will be given a far harsher sentence.
On the 3rd of November, 1998, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton went missing from her neighborhood in the Lakewood area of Jacksonville, Florida. She lived just 25 feet across the street from her friend Joshua Phillips, a 14-year-old who would later join the volunteer search teams looking for her. For an entire week, the Clifton family clung to hope, and Joshua even went door to door with the searchers. Maddie's mother found her herself when she went into Joshua's bedroom looking for the source of a water leak, lifted the bedding, and discovered her daughter stuffed inside the wooden frame of his waterbed. The little girl had been beaten with a baseball bat and stabbed multiple times. Joshua claimed she had wandered into his yard, that he hit her with the bat by accident, and that he panicked because his father was strict. He dragged her inside, finished the attack, and hid her body in his room for 7 days while his parents went about their lives. The trial was moved to Polk County because of intense local coverage in Jacksonville. The waterbed was reconstructed inside the courtroom so jurors could see how the body had been concealed. Tried as an adult, he was convicted of first-degree murder and received mandatory life without parole since Florida law barred the death penalty for killers under 16. In 2017, he was resentenced under a Supreme Court ruling that struck down mandatory juvenile life sentences. But he received life again with a review built in after 25 years, and that review process began working its way through the courts in 2025. Eric Smith.
Neighbors watched in disbelief as their quiet street was turned into a crime scene. Derek Roby was beaten to death.
Autopsy reports show he died from blows to the head. State and local investigators have no suspects.
On the 2nd of August 1993, 4-year-old Derek Roby was walking alone for the first time to a summer camp at a park in Savona, New York, in Steuben County. His mother had been busy with his crying baby brother that morning, and Derek gave her a kiss and headed off down the sidewalk by himself. He never arrived at the camp. A 13-year-old neighbor named Leith Smith was riding his bike to the same park when he spotted Derek on the road and called the younger boy over. He lured him into a wooded area off the main route. What happened in those woods is some of the most disturbing material in modern American juvenile crime files. Smith strangled Derek until he passed out, dropped a large rock onto his head, and sodomized him with a stick before pouring Kool-Aid from the child's lunchbox into the open wounds. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head with contributing asphyxia. Smith was identified within days after a family friend grew suspicious of his behavior and convinced his mother to take him to investigators, where he eventually confessed. Tried as an adult, he was convicted of second-degree murder in August of 1994 and received 9 years to life, the maximum for a juvenile in New York at the time. Smith appeared before the parole board 10 times and was denied every time. On his 11th attempt in October of 2021, parole was finally granted, and he was released in February of 2022 after serving 28 years. Lionel Tate. On the 28th of July, 1999, 6-year-old Tiffany Eunick was being babysat by Kathleen Grossett Tate, a Florida Highway Patrol trooper, at her home in Pembroke Park. Tiffany was downstairs playing with Kathleen's 12-year-old son Lionel while a wrestling program played on the television. About 45 minutes after Kathleen called down asking them to keep the noise down, Lionel came upstairs and told her Tiffany was not breathing. The autopsy told a different story. Tiffany had suffered a fractured skull, a lacerated liver, a broken rib, and dozens of bruises, and medical experts testified the beating had lasted up to 5 minutes. Lionel weighed about 170 pounds at the time, and Tiffany weighed 48. His defense argued he had only been imitating moves from professional wrestling and did not understand the force of a real body slam on a small child. His family rejected a plea deal that would have given him a 3-year sentence, and the case went to trial. In January of 2001, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder. Florida law triggered an automatic life sentence, making him the youngest American in modern history given a life without parole term. In 2003, the 4th District Court of Appeal threw out the conviction, ruling his competency should have been evaluated before trial. He was released in 2004 after a plea deal to second-degree murder and 10 years of probation, but the freedom did not last long at all. By 2006, he had violated probation multiple times, including an armed robbery of a pizza delivery man in Pembroke Pines, and he received a 30-year prison sentence that he is still serving today. Alyssa Bustamante. 15 years old and living with her grandparents in St. Martins, Missouri, Alyssa Bustamante had been dealing with severe depression, self-harm, and a dark fixation on violence for most of her young life. On her YouTube page, she had listed killing people as one of her hobbies. And on the 21st of October 2009, she followed through. Her victim was 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton, a neighbor who lived just 4 houses down the street. Bustamante had her younger sister lure Elizabeth over with an invitation to play. Then she led the girl into a wooded area near the family's home. She strangled Elizabeth with her bare hands, stabbed her 8 times in the chest, and slit her throat before burying her in one of 2 shallow graves she had dug a week earlier. That detail is what made this case stand out, because the premeditation went far beyond a heat-of-the-moment act. When Elizabeth did not come home, a massive search began across the area. Investigators zeroed in on Bustamante after finding entries in her diary where she described the experience of taking a life in enthusiastic terms. She was originally charged with first-degree murder, which would have carried life without parole. But her defense argued that untreated mental illness and a poorly managed Prozac prescription had contributed to her psychological state. In January of 2012, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. The judge handed down a life sentence with the possibility of parole for the murder, plus a consecutive 30 years for the armed criminal action charge. With both sentences running back-to-back, her earliest possible release would not come until around 2059. She was denied parole in 2024. Nehemiah Griego. On the night of the 19th of January, 2013, 15-year-old Nehemiah Griego waited until his mother fell asleep inside the family home south of Albuquerque, New Mexico, then took a .22 caliber rifle from his parents' closet. He shot her in the face as she slept and fired a second round to be certain. His 9-year-old brother Zephaniah had been sleeping beside their mother, and Nehemiah woke him, showed him the body, then shot the boy in the head while he was crying. Down the hall, his 5-year-old sister Jael and 2-year-old sister Angelina were also shot. He later told detectives he shut off his conscience completely before going in. His father Greg was a reformed gang member turned pastor at one of Albuquerque's largest churches, and he had been working an overnight shift at a homeless shelter that night. Nehemiah waited 5 hours for him to come home, then ambushed him with an AR-15. After the killings, he loaded guns into the family van, and investigators said he had considered carrying out a mass shooting at a Walmart, but never followed through. He spent the rest of the day wandering the campus of his family's church. He was initially sentenced as a juvenile, which meant release at 21. But prosecutors challenged that ruling, and in November of 2019 he was resentenced as an adult to 3 concurrent life sentences with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The New Mexico Supreme Court upheld that sentence in 2022, and he will be eligible for parole around the year 2050. Daniel Bartlam. On Easter Monday of 2011, 14-year-old Daniel Bartlam attacked his mother Jacqueline as she lay in bed at their home in Nottingham, England. He struck her 7 times in the head and face with a claw hammer, fracturing her skull so badly that she had to be identified using dental records. After the attack, he packed newspaper around her body, poured petrol over it, and set the house on fire. Then he woke his younger brother, grabbed the family dog, and went next door to raise the alarm, telling everyone an intruder had broken in. He kept that lie going for weeks, but when police examined his computer, they found something that unraveled everything. Daniel had written a fictional plot on his hard drive in which a character named Daniel Bartlam murdered his mother in almost exactly the same way. The document was a step-by-step blueprint, and he had tried to delete it just days before the killing. Investigators also found clips from Coronation Street on his computer because he had become fixated on a storyline involving the character John Stape, who battered a woman with a hammer and disguised it as an accident. The media gave him the nickname, the Coronation Street Killer. In counseling sessions before the murder, Daniel had mentioned hearing voices telling him to hurt people and having visions of killing, but his care was never escalated. He was convicted of murder at Nottingham Crown Court in April of 2012 and sentenced to life with a minimum of 16 years before parole eligibility. Raymond Childs III.
I'm not no killer, I'm not no murderer, I'm not no bad person, and a lot of people honestly...
Tonight, Raymond Childs III is maintaining his innocence.
But tonight, an Indianapolis man is on trial. He is accused of murdering most of his family. His teen brother, who survived that shooting, is now the key witness for the prosecution.
In the early morning hours of the 24th of January, 2021, 17-year-old Raymond Childs III went room to room inside his family's home near East 34th Street in Indianapolis, shooting everyone inside. It started with an argument because Raymond had been out past his curfew and his father, 42-year-old Raymond Childs Jr., confronted him about it. Raymond shot and killed his father, his 42-year-old stepmother Kezzy, his 18-year-old brother Elijah, his 13-year-old sister Rita, and Elijah's girlfriend Kiara Hawkins, who was 19 and days away from delivering a baby boy. The baby did not survive either. His 15-year-old brother, Xavier, was also hit, but managed to flee the house and reach a neighbor for help. He survived, and his testimony became the most critical evidence at trial because he identified Raymond as the shooter in open court. Raymond was arrested the following day at a relative's house, and Indiana law required he be charged as an adult. His father had been a music producer and the founder of a small record label, and the family had been actively involved in youth mentorship programs in the community. His first trial in July of 2024 ended in a mistrial after a witness confronted him in front of the jury. A retrial took place that October, and after 5 days of testimony, the jury convicted him on all 6 murder counts plus attempted murder. At sentencing in March of 2025, he took the stand and refused to take responsibility. He maintained his innocence, told the courtroom he was not a bad person, and offered no apology. The judge gave him 360 years. 6 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Paul Gingerich.
He was just 12 years old when he shot and killed a Kosciuszko County man.
Now Paul Gingerich will serve the rest of his sentence outside of prison. News Channel 15's Alyssa Ivanson has been covering this case since the crime in 2010.
In April of 2010, 12-year-old Paul Gingerich and his 15-year-old friend Colt Lundy came up with a plan to run away to Arizona together. But Colt believed his stepfather, 49-year-old Philip Danner, would never let that happen, so the two boys decided to remove him from the picture. Along with a third friend, 12-year-old Chase Williams, who stayed outside, Gingerich and Lundy climbed through a window of Danner's home near Lake Wawasee in Kosciuszko County, Indiana. They sat in armchairs and waited for him to walk in. When Danner entered, Gingerich fired the shot that killed him with a gun Lundy had given him beforehand. Chase Williams, who refused to go inside, was sentenced to juvenile detention until age 18. Lundy pleaded guilty as an adult to conspiracy to commit murder and received 30 years. But it was Gingerich's case that dominated the headlines because at 12 years old, he became the youngest person in Indiana history to be sentenced as an adult. He received 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder, and the public outcry was enormous. Legal experts and child advocates argued that a boy that young could not fully grasp the consequences of a guilty plea. The attention his case received led to the passage of a new state law nicknamed Paul's Law, which gave courts the ability to consider alternative sentencing for juveniles convicted of serious crimes. In 2016, a judge used that law to modify his sentence, and Gingerich was released in early 2017 at the age of 19 after roughly 7 years in custody. He was placed on home detention in Fort Wayne, followed by 10 years of probation. Brenda Ann Spencer.
You know, it's just little bits and pieces that have come back over the years. Like the week prior.
On the morning of the 29th of January, 1979, 16-year-old Brenda Ann Spencer opened the front window of her house in San Carlos, San Diego, aimed a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle across the street, and started firing at children arriving at Grover Cleveland Elementary School. The rifle had been a Christmas gift from her father. She fired 36 rounds. Principal Burton Ragg, 53, was killed while trying to shield students and help them inside the building. Custodian Mike Suchar, 56, was shot and killed as he ran out to pull a child to safety. 8 students were wounded, and a police officer named Robert Robb took a bullet to the neck as he responded to the scene. After the shooting, Spencer barricaded herself inside the house for several hours. During a phone call with a reporter, she gave the explanation that became one of the most quoted lines in American criminal history, saying she did not like Mondays. Negotiators talked her out, and she placed 2 weapons on the ground and walked out calmly. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and assault with a deadly weapon. On the 4th of April 1980, one day after her 18th birthday, she was sentenced to concurrent terms of 25 years to life. She became eligible for parole in 1993 and has been denied every single time. The most recent denial came in February of 2025, and she remains behind bars at the California Institution for Women in Chino, with her next parole hearing not until 2028. Curtis and Catherine Jones.
The youngest at the time to be charged as adults with murder in the country, pled out and were sentenced to 18 years in prison.
On the evening of the 6th of January, 1999, 29-year-old Sonia Nicole Spates was sitting at the dining room table in Port St. John, Florida, working on a jigsaw puzzle. She was the live-in girlfriend of Curtis Jones Sr. His 2 children, 13-year-old Catherine and 12-year-old Curtis Jr., were about to change everything. Catherine picked up her father's 9mm handgun and fired a single shot into Spates. The gun kicked in her hands and she dropped it, so her brother Curtis picked it up and emptied the remaining rounds into the woman. At the time, investigators said the motive was jealousy because the siblings resented Spates for taking their father's attention. But years later, a much darker picture emerged when Catherine alleged that a male relative had been sexually abusing her, and when she went to the adults in her life for help, no one intervened. The siblings had written a list of people they planned to harm, including their father and the relative, but after killing Spates, they panicked and ran into the woods. They were found the next morning. At 12 and 13, they became the youngest children in American history to be charged as adults with first-degree murder. Facing life sentences, both pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and were each sentenced to 18 years, followed by lifetime probation. Curtis was released on the 28th of July 2015, and Catherine followed on August 1. She has since spoken publicly about her experience, saying that prison was the first place she ever felt safe, a statement that says far more about her childhood than it does about the system. Jesus, Ayala and Jasmine Keys. On the 14th of August, 2023, 17-year-old Jesus Ayala and 16-year-old Jasmine Keys stole a Hyundai Elantra from an apartment complex in Las Vegas and went on a destructive spree through the city. That morning, they had already taken multiple cars and struck a cyclist in a separate incident who survived the hit. But the worst was still ahead. 64-year-old Andreas Probst, a retired police chief from Bell, California, was riding his bicycle in a northwest Las Vegas neighborhood, completely unaware of what was coming. Keys sat in the passenger seat with his phone out, recording. The car came up behind Probst and deliberately swerved into the bike lane, striking him from behind at full speed. Probst was left fatally injured on the side of the road. Keys later shared the footage on Instagram, and that is exactly how police connected them to the killing because a classmate recognized the pair and reported it. The case drew nationwide outrage, partly because of how brazen the act was, and partly because Ayala had reportedly told someone he expected a slap on the wrist due to his age. Both were charged as adults, and in October of 2025, they each pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. At sentencing in December of 2025, Ayala received 20 years to life and Keys received 18 years to life. Neither one said a word when the judge offered them the chance to address the courtroom. Probst's widow told the court that her world had not been damaged or shaken, but destroyed completely. David Moses.
Knocking her down. She died from the assault. Moses and two co-defendants, Angelique and Katila Nash.
On the afternoon of the 14th of April 2010, 17-year-old David Moses and two teenage girls, 17-year-old Angelique Nash and her 15-year-old sister Katila, were walking through a quiet neighborhood near East High School in Bakersfield, California, knocking on doors. They were looking for a house to break into, and neighbors had already noticed the group knocking on doors earlier that afternoon. What they found was 81-year-old Dorothy Session, who lived alone on Camino Sierra. Moses later claimed Session invited him inside to use the telephone, but however the interaction started, it turned violent fast. He beat the elderly woman inside her own home, and the injuries were severe enough that she died at the hospital. The Nash sisters were present but did not physically touch Session, yet, under California's felony murder rule at the time, all three were charged with first-degree murder because the death occurred during a burglary. Moses was convicted in 2012 and sentenced to 25 years to life, without the possibility of parole. In 2018, changes to California's juvenile sentencing laws opened the door for resentencing. A hearing was held in October of 2020, but the court found Moses had done nothing to rehabilitate himself. The judge reimposed life without parole. He appealed, and in January of 2022, the 5th District Court of Appeal upheld the sentence. Katila Nash, the youngest of the three, was released in 2019 under a separate California law that barred the prosecution of 14 and 15-year-olds as adults. Tyler Hadley.
Tyler Hadley was arrested by police. He is charged with bludgeoning his parents to death with a framing hammer inside their home.
On the afternoon of the 16th of July, 2011, 17-year-old Tyler Hadley was alone with his parents at their home in Port St. Lucie, Florida. His father Blake was 54 and his mother Mary Jo was 47. He had already hidden both of their cell phones so they could not call for help. He took 3 ecstasy pills because he later said he did not believe he could go through with it sober. Then he grabbed a claw hammer from the garage. His mother was working on the family computer when he came up behind her and stood there for roughly 5 minutes before swinging the hammer into the back of her head. His father came running to see what was happening, and Tyler turned on him too. According to autopsy reports, he struck his mother 36 times, and his father at least 39. He dragged their bodies into the master bedroom and spent 3 hours cleaning up the blood, then went on Facebook and invited people over. Between 40 and 60 guests showed up. Midway through the night, Tyler pulled his best friend aside and told him what he had done. The friend did not believe it until Tyler showed him his father's body through the bedroom door. That friend called police, and officers arrived early the next morning. Tyler pleaded no contest to 2 counts of first-degree murder and received 2 life sentences in 2014. Under a Florida law requiring review of juvenile life terms, he was resentenced in December of 2018 and the judge reimposed life with a mandated review after 25 years.